The sickening thud of the 5-gallon paint bucket, echoing through the massive foyer, is a sound I will never forget. Pure white primer surged like a tidal wave across the gleaming imported black Italian marble floor. I stood there with my hands still covered in plaster dust and watched a week of grocery money evaporate in a single second. It was not an accident. I saw his polished leather shoe dart out and kick the bucket, just as I was reaching down for the handle. Vance was the site manager for this multi-million-dollar mansion project. He was a man who wore expensive suits to a construction site and looked at guys like me as if we were dirt stuck to the bottom of those fancy shoes. He immediately got in my face, and his breath smelled like expensive coffee and cheap cigars. He screamed at the top of his lungs and called me a clumsy piece of trash. He pointed at the spreading puddle of white paint and told me I was going to pay for every single inch of that ruined marble. He said he was going to deduct thousands of dollars from my pay. He told me I was fired the second I cleaned up my own disgusting mess. My hands balled into tight fists at my sides. Every instinct in my body told me to stand up for myself and wipe that arrogant smirk right off his face. My knuckles turned white, and my heart pounded in my ears like a sledgehammer. But then I closed my eyes and took a slow and shaky breath. I thought about my little girl, waiting for me back at our tiny apartment. I thought about the empty refrigerator and the overdue electric bill sitting on the kitchen counter. I thought about the fact that if I lost my temper right now, she would go to bed hungry tonight. So I unclenched my fists and let my arms fall heavy to my sides. I swallowed the massive lump of pride in my throat and forced my tears back down. I looked away from his mocking eyes and stared at the wall I had just spent the last 9 hours perfecting. It was a masterpiece of craftsmanship. I had carefully rolled every single square inch until the surface was as smooth as glass. There was not a single brushstroke out of place. I put my heart and soul into that wall, because that is the only way I know how to work. Vance did not care about the dedication or the skill it took to make something that beautiful. He only cared about making himself feel big, by making someone else feel small. If you have ever had to swallow your tears and endure injustice at work, just to bring home an honest paycheck for your family, please drop a comment below so we can give each other strength. I swore to my very soul that my clothes might be stained with dirt, but my character and my love for my child will always be clean and standing tall before life. If you believe in the courage of a father, please hit that subscribe button to walk this journey with my daughter and me. Vance crossed his arms and looked down his nose at me. He told me to get on my knees and scrub the floor until it shined. He wanted to humiliate me in front of the other contractors, who were now stopping their work to watch the spectacle. He laughed and told his assistant that guys like me belonged on the floor anyway. I did not say a single word back to him. I slowly lowered myself down onto the cold and hard marble. I grabbed my clean rags from my tool belt. I did not panic, and I did not rush. I carefully folded the rag and began to wipe the edges of the spill, pushing the paint inward so it would not spread and ruin more of the stone. I used my exact scraping blade to gently lift the drying primer without leaving a single scratch on the floor. Even on my knees, while being insulted by a man who had no respect for hard work, I did my job with absolute precision. Vance kept throwing insults at the back of my head. He told me I would be scrubbing floors for the rest of my miserable life. I just kept my head down and focused on the rhythmic motion of my hands. I let the thought of my daughter's smile block out the poison coming from his mouth. I knew who I was, and I knew what I was working for. Suddenly, the heavy oak front doors swung open. The loud clicking of sharp high heels echoed through the silent foyer. Every contractor in the room instantly froze, and Vance immediately stopped laughing. I wiped the sweat from my forehead and glanced over my shoulder. The real owner of the estate had just walked in. She was a self-made real estate mogul who was known for being absolutely ruthless in business. She wore a sharp, tailored suit and carried an aura of absolute authority that made the entire room feel 10 degrees colder. Vance immediately, completely changed his tone. He slapped on a fake and nervous smile and rushed over to greet her. He started talking a mile a minute and pointed an accusing finger down at me. He told her that I was a careless and worthless painter who had just ruined her beautiful imported floor. He assured her that he was taking care of it and that he was going to fire me without pay. I kept my head down and prepared for the final blow. I braced myself for the wealthy owner to join in and kick me while I was already down on the ground. She stood there in complete silence for what felt like an absolute eternity. The entire massive foyer was so incredibly quiet, you could hear a single pin drop on the marble. Every contractor in the room was holding their breath, waiting for the inevitable explosion. Vance was sweating bullets now, and nervously shifting his weight from one foot to the other. He kept frantically rambling about how he was going to dock my pay immediately to cover the damages. He swore he would get a professional stone restoration crew out here by tomorrow morning to fix my terrible mistake. He pointed his finger at me again and told her I was completely incompetent. But the wealthy owner was not even looking at the expanding puddle of white primer on the floor. She ignored Vance completely and walked right past him like he was a ghost. She stepped very carefully over the mess and stopped directly in front of the massive wall I had been working on all day. She slowly reached out and ran her manicured fingers across the freshly dried surface. She did not say a single word about the ruined imported Italian marble. Instead, she closely examined the seamless edges around the door frames and the flawless coverage on the crown molding. She traced the perfect lines, where the white paint met the dark wood trim without a single bleed. She turned around slowly and looked directly into my tired eyes. She asked me in a very calm and steady voice how long I had been painting houses. I cleared my dry throat and told her I had been doing this kind of manual labor for over 15 years. Vance tried to interrupt again and loudly proclaimed that my experience did not matter because I was just a clumsy liability to his multi-million-dollar project. He said guys like me were a dime a dozen, and he could replace me in an hour. She did not even look at him, but simply held up one single finger in his direction. Vance instantly snapped his mouth shut, like a metal steel trap. Then, she finally looked down at the floor. She did not look at the spill itself. She looked straight at Vance's highly polished, expensive leather shoes. She pointed an elegant finger at his right foot and asked him a very simple and devastating question. She asked him how a man manages to get a perfect splatter of white primer exclusively on the top of his shoe if the painter was supposedly the one who dropped the bucket backward. She asked if paint suddenly learned how to defy gravity just to ruin his footwear. The color completely drained from Vance's arrogant face in a matter of seconds. He started stuttering uncontrollably and taking small steps backward toward the front door. She told him that a man who takes the time and intense focus to paint a wall with this level of absolute perfection does not carelessly kick over his own bucket of materials. She said the wall was a testament to patience, and someone with that much patience does not throw tantrums with supplies. She looked Vance up and down with an expression of pure, unadulterated disgust. She told him he was a petty and arrogant bully who was completely out of his depth managing real hard-working professionals. She fired him right there on the spot, in front of every single contractor in the building. She told him he had exactly 10 minutes to clear out his luxury trailer outside before she called the local police for trespassing. Do you think a simple act of kindness from someone with power can actually change the fate of a struggling family? Let me know your honest thoughts down in the comments. I prayed to God right then to give me the strength of a mountain, to stand firm against the world's cruelty, to protect my dignity so my little girl has a father she can look up to. If you want to help us keep that light of compassion burning, please hit that subscribe button. Vance practically ran out of the heavy oak front doors, without ever looking back or saying another word. The rest of the crew slowly went back to work, with small smiles on their faces. I was still kneeling on the cold marble floor, holding my white paint rag in my trembling hands. She walked back over to me and gently told me that I did not need to be on my knees anymore. She told me to leave the paint and let the overnight cleaning crew handle the rest. She did not treat me like a dirty contractor or a lower-class citizen who was beneath her notice. She walked over to a temporary catering table in the dining room and poured a steaming cup of warm water from a silver thermos. She walked back and personally handed it to me, while telling me to take a deep breath and sit down on a nearby crate. My calloused hands were shaking so badly from the adrenaline crash that I could barely hold the small paper cup. She sat down on a dusty chair right across from me, completely ignoring the dirt on the upholstery. She looked deeply into my eyes and asked me why I did not fight back when Vance was screaming directly in my face. She said she saw my fists clench, and she knew I had the strength to lay him out flat. I took a slow sip of the warm water and looked down at my worn-out boots covered in plaster and age. I told her that my foolish pride was simply not worth my daughter going to bed hungry tonight. I explained that I was a single dad raising a sweet 7-year-old girl, completely on my own, after her mother passed away. I told her this paycheck was the only thing standing between us, and a terrifying eviction notice this month. I explained that I could take the brutal insults, and I could endure the public humiliation, as long as my little girl was safe and fed, and completely unaware of how cruel this world can be. Her sharp eyes suddenly softened, and I could see a genuine wave of raw emotion wash over her elegant face. She told me that she did not grow up in luxury mansions like this one. She said she grew up with absolutely nothing, but a fiercely protective father who worked 3 brutal manual labor jobs just to keep a leaky roof over her head. She said she recognized that exact same quiet sacrifice in my posture, the second she walked into the room. She reached into her expensive designer handbag and pulled out a thick leather checkbook. She quickly wrote a check that not only covered my full wages for the entire month, but included a massive cash bonus for the exceptional craftsmanship on her walls. She handed me the folded piece of paper and told me that true character is what you do when someone actively tries to strip away your dignity. She sincerely thanked me for treating her future home with such profound respect, even when I was being treated so poorly by her own staff. Hours later, the sun had finally set over the busy city, and the massive mansion was glowing with warm amber lights. My long, exhausting shift was officially over, and the construction site was completely quiet and peaceful. I sat down on the cold stone front steps and pulled out my cracked cell phone from my pocket. I dialed the familiar number to the elderly neighbor, who was kindly watching my daughter for the evening. When my little girl finally got on the phone, her sweet, innocent voice instantly melted away every single ounce of exhaustion deep in my bones. She babbled excitedly about her day at school, and proudly told me she ate all her vegetables for dinner, just like she promised she would. I smiled so hard my tired face actually hurt, and a single happy tear rolled down my dusty cheek. I felt the thick, folded check resting safely in my chest pocket, right over my beating heart. I told her Daddy was bringing home her absolute favorite strawberry ice cream to celebrate a very good day. I did not know it at the time, but the wealthy owner was standing out on the second-floor balcony directly above me. She was quietly looking down and watching me talk to my daughter in the cool night air. She saw a large man covered head to toe in dried paint and plaster dust, sitting all alone in the dark. But she also saw a dedicated father, whose entire soul was radiating with the brightest and most beautiful love in the entire world. Paint stains can be washed out of clothes, but a father's deep love is permanent. Leave a warm comment down below to share this little moment of joy with my daughter and me tonight.